and welcome to the Murder She Wrote Rewatch podcast. I'm your host, Previ, and this is my wonderful little podcast that I have decided to do just for fun and giggles. Uh, so, what is Murder She Wrote? Because there's some people out there that probably don't know. Well, Murder She Wrote, according to the Wikipedia page, I've decided to look it up on that, uh, is an American crime drama television series starring Angela Lansbury as mystery writer and amateur detective Jessica Fletcher. It aired for 12 seasons with 264 episodes from 1984 to 1996 on the CBS network. And it is a show that I used to watch quite a lot as a young child and teenager. Uh, I enjoyed the heck out of it. I've always loved crime drama shows, and this is one of them. Uh, it was followed by 4 TV films and an unsuccessful spin-off series, which was produced in 1987, The Law and Harry McGraw. Now, I believe The Law and Harry McGraw, if I can check, yeah, it starred Jerry Orbach from Law and Order. Jerry Orbach being one of the detectives who had uh, quite a bit of fame in Law and Order as NYPD Detective Lenny Briscoe. He was in it for what was it here? Yeah, 1992 to 2004. So that's what, 92 to 2002? 12 years. 12 years on Law and Order as that detective. He was always one of my favorites to watch on Law and Order. It's a big surprise. Um, but yeah, it's been quite a wonderful show back in the day. 12 seasons, and I am going to attempt to rewatch all of them and tell you all out there about them. That's what this is. I got the idea originally to do this from Loading Ready Run. Graham Stark and Kathleen DeVere were doing the Magnum Rewatch podcast, and I was listening to that and enjoying the hell out of it. And they had mentioned that there was a crossover episode with Magnum PI later on in the series with Murder She Wrote. So if anybody wanted to do a Murder She Wrote podcast, there you go. And I'm like, challenge accepted. That, and I finally got an amazing deal on all 12 seasons of the DVDs, box set of Murder She Wrote. So here I am doing it. Let's see, what else is there? Miss Lansbury, nominated for a total of 10 Golden Globes and 12 Emmy Awards for her work on Murder, She Wrote. She holds the record for the most Golden Globe nominations and wins for Best Actress in a Television Drama Series, and the most Emmy nominations for Outstanding Lead Actress in a Drama Series for Murder, She Wrote, with those nominations netting her 4 Golden Globe Awards. The series received 3 nominations but no wins in the Outstanding Drama Series category. At the Emmys, it was nominated for a Golden Globe in the same category 6 times and won twice. So it's one of those shows that's really quite cemented, at least for people of my age that used to grow up with it and simply enjoyed it. Uh, so yes, there's some interesting things going on. So we're gonna dive in here to the episode. I just finished watching it, so it's still fresh in my mind, though I will forget things. So I'm gonna try and see if I can't find the synopsis here, just to refresh my memory. If there is one, there might not be. Boop boop. Do 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 do. Bing. Wait, go back. Yeah, because there's quite a bit of interesting stuff. Aha. going on? Okay, there we go. Synopsis. All right. So, first off, we have the wonderful cast starring Angela Lansbury. We first see the episode when it fades in. There's this beautiful lady, blonde hair, wearing this nightgown, carrying a candle as she comes down the stairs in this dark house. It's all very spooky and ominous going on. And like the wind blows the door open, and she closes it, and it blows the other one, and she closes it, and she's calling out because she hears noises for George. And you're going to be very upset with George if this is a trick or something. And she finally opens a door, and there's this big burly man with like an executioner's mask, and he's got this big axe in his hand, and she screams as he lifts the axe to kill her, and like, oh my god, it's starting out with murder. But no, it's not, because it was actually a play, because the director of the play is all yelling cut and berating the actors for their slow cues and whatnot. And that's when we meet Jessica Fletcher, because she's in the audience with two of her friends. I'm not sure if her friends are listed. Not that I can see if they are. If they were listed, because they're not in it very much. They're only like there in the beginning, because Jessica's in the middle of these two, and the director sees them and is like, "You're not supposed to be here. What are you doing here?" He's like, "You can't. This is a private rehearsal. Blah blah blah." And they all get up and they're like a little shocked at this brusqueness from this director. And of course, Jessica's like, "Well, you asked us to come here," and he's like, "Why would I do that? Why would I do that? I don't even know you." And then they explain that they're from the PTA, to which he immediately replied, and I quite enjoyed this line. He's like, "Oh, the cookie ladies, right? Listen, you need to go and talk to this guy, and he'll set things up for you, and so we can get you cookies for opening night and blah blah blah." Because it's a small town theater. Because she's back in her home of Cabot Cove, the most dangerous place in the world. More on that later. So the really amusing bit, the thing that cements it, and what lets you, the viewer, know that Jessica Fletcher is going to be our sleuth. She's going to be the one who solves the crimes. Is that this play is like a murder mystery that they were watching, and they have only seen the first act. That was like the first act, and that was all they managed to watch. And Jessica immediately says, "Oh, okay, we'll do that. You have a good time, sir, with your play. I'm sure nobody will know that it was the uncle that did it." And she walks out with her two friends. To which the director's like, "Bah?" And goes and runs after and stops. He's like, how did you know? How did you know it was the uncle? I mean, somebody slipped your script, right? And she basically is like, no. It was obvious because, he was wearing a different tie when he came back after this. And there was no reason for him to do that. And he was aware of this conversation, which he couldn't have been unless he was the murderer. Like, she just pieced it together out of the clues that were in the play up till that point, letting you know, the viewer, that Jessica Fletcher is not only extremely observant, but has a keen analytical mind and is able to piece things together. and that's how we find out that she is this sleuth. After that, it kind of segues into the opening credits, where we get a longer version of the opening theme, which I'm not going to play here. And that opening theme isn't what was in the opening of this episode of the podcast. I just picked something that had a similar feel. If any of you want to look up on YouTube, I'm sure you can find the Murder, She Wrote opening theme song. It's this very light, airy piano theme. Do 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 do, and it's a very very lighthearted theme. But we get this long version of it, and we get to see Jessica running around, doing jogging, basically talking to her students because she's a substitute English teacher in Cabot Cove, and all kinds of little things like that. Just daily life, kicking around Cabot Cove, the most dangerous place in the world. I'll get back to that, as I said. But she's jogging and running around town and just enjoying life. And then she goes and runs. You see her like jogging up towards her house and picking up a paper from in front of it. And we start hearing a phone ringing over the music. And she starts running to get in the house because the phone's in her house that's ringing. A very nice segue. I liked that. So she runs in and grabs it and answers the phone. And you hear her talk to Grady. Grady Fletcher. Now, Grady Fletcher is a recurring character in this series. He is in quite a few. Let's see if I can find the actor's name. Nope, that's Caleb. Grady Fletcher. Click. Let's see who he is. Michael Horton is an actor known for The Legend of the Prince Valiant, Star Trek First Contact, 1996, Star Trek Insurrection, 1998, married to Debbie Zip. They have 2 children. I didn't know he was in Star Trek First Contact. Who was he in Star Trek First Contact? Let's go find out together. Star Trek First Contact. Security officer. Okay. He was Coven in an episode of Star Trek Voyager. Lieutenant Daniels in Star Trek Insurrection. Let's see if I can find something else that people might know that he's done. Oh yeah, he's been in like 12 episodes of Murder, She Wrote as Grady Fletcher, or Grady Ambrose Fletcher. The Legend of Prince Valiant TV series, Matlock TV series. He's been in a lot of TV. Dances with Wolves. Is it the movie? The movie Dances with Wolves. Yeah, the original, like Dances with Wolves, with what's his face, Kevin Costner. Who was he in that? Captain Cargill. If any of you out there happen to have seen Dances with Wolves, Captain Cargill. He was that. And then a lot of really older stuff that was like probably before a lot of people's time. Gem, the TV series. Oh my god. Like the Gem? Gem and the Holograms, yeah. He was a voice actor on Gem, I guess. And Transformers. He was a voice actor in Transformers. He was... Who is this? Chip Chase. Who's Chip Chase again? He was the... Character's biography is empty. That tells me nothing. But apparently he was Chip Chase. And Tommy Talltree in G.I. Joe, the TV series. He did a lot of TV series back in the day. Hill Street Blues, The Incredible Hulk. Wow. Yeah, he's been around. Mr. Grady there, Michael Horton. But Grady's calling Jessica. And Jessica, of course, is immediately worried because where Grady is in New York, it's like 6 in the morning, and is like, why would he be calling? What's wrong? Have you lost your job? Because Jessica is an extremely caring person as an aunt for family and friends. She very much is that sort of person that is worried, that worries about people. She's a bit of a busybody, as some people would say. So, he's not calling because of that, no. He's calling because of the book that Jessica has written that she lent him, and he read and really enjoyed it. Except, he's not calling because he just enjoyed the book. even though she kind of is like, well, I'm glad you enjoyed it. I just hope you didn't show it to anybody. Womp womp. Yeah, he totally did. He showed it to his boss, who basically put the book out there and got it published. And this is where things start kind of going off the rails for Jessica, because she's from a small town. She's a very small town sensible person is how she is. So all this big city living and stuff she doesn't really know or like or want to get involved in. And to find out her book has been published and people are reading it. We get to see a bit of the scene with a bookstore, her local bookstore, where they have her picture up with the books, and it's like number 8 on the bestsellers list. And she's like looking at that, and she sees the bookstore owner uh, peek out from behind the window, and he like waves at her, takes the sign off that's like, number 8 bestseller, and puts up a new little sign over top of the picture saying, this week number 2 on the bestseller list, because it's just super popular. So that's it's quite the interesting little thing, and it goes through this whole thing, and she has to go to New York to meet with all these media types and whatnot. So her two friends is like, well, you can't go like that. He's like, no, we need to get you made up, and they take her to a salon, and there's just this amusing scene of her with like this mud mask on and these big wide eyes, like she can't believe what's happening to her, that her life has suddenly become this whirlwind. Uh, it's really amusing. It made me laugh. So she does finally get to New York, where she meets Grady, her nephew, Grady Fletcher, and there was another lady. Let's see if I can find her. Bum 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 bum. Bum 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 bum. No, maybe not. Was it Kitty? Kitty Donovan? Was that it? Jessica Brown? No. It's not that one. It's not that one as well. But there was another actress. I think it was Kitty Donovan. Jessica Brown. IMDb. Fresh Horses. Murder, She Wrote. And Ma. Oh, wow. Yeah, she was like... Apparently she's only got 4 credits to her name. Was The Lady Killer, an episode of Jessie, the TV series, The Lady Killer, The Murder of Sherlock Holmes, which is this episode, MASH, or After MASH, and Fresh Horses. It's like 1984 to 1988, 4 roles, and that's about it. Huh. Yeah. Very strange. But I think that was her. I do believe. So she gets there and meets with her and Grady. And they end up finding this, going to meet the publisher and making the rounds in New York with like radio talk shows and attending book signings. She was on this one like little television show where this woman was interviewing her, saying about how it's amazing that the killer of her book was the pregnant woman, and how that advances the feminist agenda, and going on like this, basically like steamrolling over Jessica while she's trying to explain that you shouldn't be telling people who the killer is, and that's not what I intended, and so on. It's just this amazing, quick, rapid cut with all these different horrible people, basically, that she's being forced to endure. One radio host actually asks her, he's like, do you have a criminal record? When they're off the air, because he's like, give me something to work with here. And this is even after she's met with the person, Preston Giles, who is going to be her book author. Canadian-born actor Arthur Hill played Justin Preston Giles. He's been in quite a few things. Not for a while. Murder, She Wrote was the last, I think, of his acting. Because he's got 116 credits, so he's been in a lot of stuff. Way, way back in like 1947. He's been doing stuff. But it seems Murder, She Wrote was the last that he was in. Huh, that's interesting. As Preston Giles. 1984, the first pilot episode, Preston Giles. And then again in 1990, he plays the same character, Preston Giles, in another season. That episode being The Return of Preston Giles. I am now interested to see that episode because of the stuff that happens. In this one, he's been in a few things. But yeah, Arthur Hill, born Melfort, Saskatchewan. Very cool. Very cool. I like that. So she meets him, goes and does the rounds with all the press people, and she's not impressed. So she's like, I'm going home. I'm going back to Cabot Cove, and goes back to the train station and has a little conversation with the African American porter who happens to be there. This very nice guy. What was his name? Michael? Was it Michael? No, Daniel. It was Daniel is what she called him. Let's look up his thing. Who is that actor? There's a lot of people. A lot of characters to keep track of because they basically introduce like all these key players and whatnot. And it all ends up, they keep recurring throughout the episode. John Hancock was apparently the actor who played Daniel. 1941 to 1992. He died in 1992, October 12th, age 51. Aw, sad to hear that. He's been in Love and War TV series, Pacific Station TV series, LA Law TV series as a judge, Star Trek The Next Generation as Admiral Hayden. He was in 2 episodes of that. The Defector and the Wounded. Family Matters as Leroy. Matlock, Family Ties. Gus Thompson, if any of you have seen Family Ties. And now we're getting back into older shows. But Daniel is he's the porter guy at the train station in New York, and she has a conversation with him, and then Preston Giles shows up with a bouquet of flowers and is like, "No, don't leave, please, don't leave. I'm having a party at my estate out in the suburbs and whatnot. You come and spend the weekend, have a good time. I'm sorry, please, blah blah blah," and whisks her away. And there's a bit of a romance bubbling there between Preston Giles and Jessica Fletcher. Especially because at one point when they get to the party, like on the way there, they're flirting a little bit in the cab. And then at the party, she ends up finding out it's a costume party. And she doesn't have a thing to wear because everyone's going as their favorite fictional characters. So naturally, Jessica has this wonderful little quip like, "Well, I can always go as Lady Godiva," and starts walking away, and she turns around and gives a little wink and goes like that to Preston Giles. It's very sassy, and it just adds that little bit of a flair to Jessica Fletcher's character. I really like it. So what happens then? Well, she ends up being dressed up as a Cinderella's godmother. fairy godmother, in this beautiful pink dress with a big wand and a star on it, that she apparently, quote unquote, threw together out of odds and ends. Yeah. This looks like a professionally made dress that she just threw together out of odds and ends. I'm sure some people would like to look at that and say it is very much a Mary Sue type thing. It's like she can do everything, but it's not really that way. At least I don't think so. And if it was, she may be the originator of the Mary Sue. Possibly, I don't know. But it's Jessica Fletcher. I mean, how can you deny this wonderful old English substitute English teacher from Maine, good old Cabot Cove, Maine. So, before I go on, I'll explain a little bit. As I said, I was going to about Cabot Cove being the most dangerous place on earth because over 12 seasons of the show, I don't know how many, but over 12 seasons of it, there's been a lot of murders that Jessica Fletcher has solved. And a large proportion of them happen in and around Cabot Cove, Maine, where people that she knows, relatives, etc., are suspects for the murders of people, and she has to get involved and save. And basically, prove no, they didn't do it. My family didn't do it. But I don't know the exact number. It's out there somewhere. I'll see if I can't find it for the next episode. just to drop that little nugget of knowledge on you. But it's a large portion of, and we're talking like seasons that, this is not like modern day television series. Back then, a television season was like at least a good hour long episode, at least an hour long episode where, and you had 26 of them, usually. Somewhere around 23 to 26 episodes per season. So 264 episodes. How many people have died in that percentage? I don't know, but it was a fair margin to the level that people have theorized that maybe Jessica's the one doing all the killing, because they all seem to happen around her. Who knows? It's not her. It's not Jessica. She's just a good old woman who's just gonna solve all the murders. Good old Jessica Fletcher. So we end up running into a few characters in the lead up to the party. A Louise McCallum, who is the wife of Caleb McCallum, and you get to see those two, Louise and Caleb. Caleb being the fish person that Grady is working for. He owns a string of chowder houses, Captain Caleb's chowder houses, and it was portrayed by Brian Keith, son of actor Robert Keith. He was a fairly old fellow, even in this episode. Oh, interesting. Spider-Man TV series. He was Uncle Ben Parker for the voice for a couple episodes. Duckman, Private Dick. 1997, he was Duckman's father. I didn't know that. He was in Touched by an Angel. What else we got here? The Monroes. I don't think. The Commish. He was in The Commish for one episode. Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Mullibok. I don't know that one. Major Dad. Walter and Emily. God, Major Dad. I forgot Major Dad. Oh, wow. Yeah, that show. I've watched a lot of TV in my day. Heartland TV series. Perry Mason. Walt Disney's Wonderful World of Color. Hardcastle and McCormick. Judge Milton C. Hardcastle. Interesting. So yeah, there's a lot of episodes he's been in. A lot of TV series. Archer, the TV series. No, not the animated one. We're talking the one from 1980, 1975. A lot of television. Yeah, there's not a lot of stuff people would know, but Brian Keith, if any of you are interested, he's a rather grumpy and cantankerous fellow in this one as Caleb McCallum. And we have his wife, Anne Francis, Louise McCallum, and she's been in stuff fairly recently. Episode Without a Trace in 2004. Sadly, she passed away in 2011 at the age of 80. The Drew Carey Show, she was in it for a little bit. Any of you remember that? Some other stuff. Oh, interesting. Huh. She was in the first episode of Murder, She Wrote as Louise McCallum. She was in another episode 2 years later as Margot Perry, and she was in another episode 4 years after that as Lee Haley. Interesting. But back then the internet and instant information wasn't a thing. So when people would see an actor or an actress on an episode of a television show, because that show would only air again if the show got into syndication, they wouldn't necessarily recognize it or them immediately, unless they actually knew that particular actor. But Anne Francis, she played Caleb's wife, and we first get to see those two, where the good captain is shooting clay pigeons out back of Preston Giles's manor house there, and the his wife is having a drink already. Bit of a day drinker. And there's a little bit of tension between the two of them. So we don't know what's all going on there. This is how a lot of episodes tend to begin. They introduce these characters. The party gets underway. And we get to see a fellow dressed up as Ebenezer Scrooge playing the piano and singing. Appears to be a theater type. Played by, what's his name? Bert Convy. Bert Convy. Now, Bert Convy's been in a lot. The character's name is Peter Brill. And he was in quite a lot of stuff back in the day. The Love Boat. He was in quite a few things. He was in 2 episodes of Murder, She Wrote as Peter Brill in the first one. 2 years later, in '86, he was back as Christopher Bundy. Fantasy Island, he played 3 or 4 different characters in that. Neil Townsend in It's Not Easy. Don't know that one. A lot of interesting roles. But we have him playing the piano, and we see another young lady. We find out her name is Ashley Vickers, who ends up coming in from outside while he's playing the piano and joking with some of the other guests. And she comes in wearing what looks like the Evil Queen outfit from Snow White, all dark purple and looking very much how to say dark and forbidding. Trisha O'Neill is her, the actress that played is that actress, and she's been in things quite recently. She was the Earth Alliance president in Babylon 5 in the beginning TV movie. Interesting. Beverly Hills 90210. Yeah, I know. Run away. Run away. Um, Captain Rachel Garrett in Star Trek The Next Generation. Yesterday's Enterprise. And Kurak in another episode. So yeah, she's been in a few things over the years. Oh, cool. Born March 11th, 1945. Shreveport, Louisiana. Very cool. So you get to see her. And who else? There's one other person we get to see. And we get to find out about. Where is it? No, not yet. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. So, the party starts happening, and we start getting some interesting things happening, because we see Caleb McCallum come down dressed as Sherlock Holmes, and there's another young lady dressed as Little Red Riding Hood, and you see him walking up right behind her, lifting up that red hood and her dress and copping a feel right then and there. Of course, this being 1984, nothing was shown, but there was a heavy implication that that's what he was doing, that he was enjoying himself, and that she wasn't exactly adverse to the idea. And he's a married man, who we found. We've already established this. But you see Ashley Vickers, the dark-haired young lady, happen to turn around and see this, and you see her looking very angry and glaring, and there's a close-up on her face. So it's like, ooh, we know there's going to be a murder happening. She's the one that's going to do it, baby. Maybe. We just don't know. And a lot of different things happen. You see Grady and Kitty, I believe it is. I hope I'm right with that. Because I can't actually remember what that name is. There's so many characters in these episodes. It's hard to remember the names of everybody. Oh yeah, I'll get to that in a minute. There's a bus scene with a couple of character actors that people will know. Which yeah, I was like, at one point later on, when I was watching the show, I'm like, is that who I think it is? It is. But you see a lot of interesting things, because you see Grady and the woman that he's kind of got a relationship with out walking and having a romantic time. Only Grady notices a light, some flashlight up in one of the things, and he's like, isn't that my room? Isn't that where I'm staying? And he goes and runs through the party and runs upstairs, and Jessica sees him running through the party and follows him up, and he confronts this fellow older man in the room and starts beating him up. Only the man tries to run away, and Jessica trips him with her wand. And he gets captured and gets questioned, and we find out he's a private detective, and he's been hired by one of the wealthy clients, by a wealthy client, to look into somebody at this party. Ooh, intrigue. And he won't divulge what he was hired to do or who hired him, because discretion is his middle name. And he even kind of bluffs, because they're about to call the police on him, and he's like, if you do that, then I will make sure that everyone will know what I was doing here, looking into that, and then all of your guests will be in the public eye, and wouldn't that be terrible for them? And this being back in the 1984, people tended to look on that sort of thing a little differently, being plastered across the media and whatnot, especially if you're rich and influential. It was something to be avoided. Unlike some people. Pardon me. It's been a long day. But this happens, and he goes to leave. And as he goes to leave, he happens to look at a little statue of the scales of justice, and he turns to uh, Preston Giles, and he says that aren't you? I think I've I think I've deduced who you're supposed to be, what character you've dressed up as. I've been trying to figure it out since I got here. And he's like, "You're the Count of Monte Cristo, aren't you?" And Preston Giles is like, "Yes, of course." And there's a little moment there, and then he gets escorted off. La di da. And some other things happen because you see there's discussion of with Peter Brill on how much a production, even an off-Broadway production, is like $250,000. So it's a lot of money. And there is a scene with the wife, Louise McCallum, where she's pretty drunk and she wants to go home, but Caleb wants to stay. So she goes to go and drive herself home. And Jessica, who's gotten to know Louise, they're kind of a little bit friends, is like, go and help her home, Grady. And of course, Grady tries, but ends up getting pushed aside by a drunk woman because he's Grady Fletcher. He's not very strong or very much on the ball. He's a little bit of a hapless sort. So he gets pushed aside, and she drives off in the car. And there's another scene with the lady, Ashley Vickers, who ends up spilling champagne on herself. So Jessica's like, "Oh, we can take care of that. We need to get that cleaned before it stains. I have just the thing for it." Drags her off into the kitchen, where she overhears a Preston Giles talking on the phone to a newspaper reporter, as he says, from the Times, and he wants to interview Jessica, but Preston basically begged him off for like another day. We'll take care of it. And then you find out that Jessica goes and gets like eggs and milk and baking soda and a couple other things from the fridge and mixes it all up in a bowl and drags her off upstairs to use this mystery concoction to make sure that it won't stain. It's an old family recipe, she says, that'll get the spots off a leopard. She has a very down-home way of talking that kind of appeals to me. As somebody who originally grew up down east, pretty much on the East Coast, that sort of like Maine an area way of speaking is very, very familiar to me, and it just makes me think like I'm watching somebody from down home. So that happens, and you see Peter Brill singing songs to all the people because they want some songs to be sung. There's one lady who comes in dressed up as Peter Pan. Click. Let's see here. Billy Hayes. Delightfully talented Billy Hayes. Oh wow, she's still going. She's still going. She's done a lot of voice work lately. 10 episodes of Transformers Rescue Bots, Teen Titans Go, Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy, Granny Applecheeks, Mother May I in Teen Titans. Yeah, she does a lot of voice work in this one. Granny Whammy and Darkwing Duck, apparently. Crazy Eddie, Mrs. Half Nelson and Tailspin. What else do we got here? MathNet, Mrs. McGregor. Oh God, I remember MathNet. But yeah, she's done a lot of voices. She does a lot of additional voices for quite a lot of cartoons and whatnot. Has since like the 80s and whatnot. So that's pretty cool that she does that. I do like that. like seeing voice actors, especially when they're not voice acting, when they're actually acting. So that's pretty cool. HR Puff and Stuff, apparently. Puff and Stuff and HR Puff and Stuff. Witchy Poo, I guess. Cackling Witch and Shrek Forever After. 3D. I don't know. So she's done a fair bit of voice work. She's a very short, boisterous woman in this one, dressed up in Peter Pan. So that's kind of she was kind of interesting. As soon as I seen her, I was like, she reminds me of somebody. But you get to see her, and there's another fellow dressed up as Humpty Dumpty. Let's see here. Click. Who's this guy? Richard Erdman. Richard Erdman. Community. Apparently he played somebody on Community called Leonard in like 53 episodes. So I guess that's pretty big. I've never seen Community myself. But yeah, he was that. Oh, and he played like a minor character in this one, and someone named Jonathan. 5 years later on Murder, She Wrote. As well as a bunch of voices. Oh, I saw Darkwing Duck. Oh no, DuckTales. Mayor Rufus B. Pinfeathers. On DuckTales. So yeah, that's pretty cool. Those two are like minor characters, but they stood out to me as being, very much people who were quite famous at the time. Which makes sense. And you get to see those. Oh yeah, that's the guy. Dennis Patrick was Dexter Baxendale. He was the private investigator who showed up. We didn't look at him. But he's been in a few things, I would imagine. Yeah, he was back in Murder, She Wrote 5 years later as Dr. Robert Markle. Someone else entirely. Ooh. And a whole bunch of TV series. Yeah, he's been in a ton of TV series during the day. He had that charm, that charisma. That's pretty cool. So we get to see that. All these little things in the party. And then the next morning, oh no, they find someone dead. In the pool. Face blown off with a shotgun. And that person, they think, is Caleb McCallum. Because they haven't got an identification, but the person was dressed as Sherlock Holmes, which Caleb McCallum was in the party. They make it a point of letting us know this. They point things out. And that's why this episode is called The Death of Sherlock Holmes. I should have mentioned that earlier. I think I did, but I may not have. If I didn't, forgive me. The pilot episode is The Death of Sherlock Holmes, which in itself is interesting, I find, because you have the fact that this is a murder mystery show, and they're starting it off by killing Sherlock Holmes. All too soon, the police arrive with the chief of police of the tiny little area, the little village town where this murder takes place. New Holvang, it's called. And the chief of police, Chief Roy Gunderson, is played by none other than Ned Beatty. Oh yes, the Ned Beatty. And you people should know Ned Beatty. Ned Beatty. He has been in everything. He was Senator Charles F. Meacham in Shooter, the War. Or like the War, listen. Shooter, the movie. He's been in, what is it? Homicide, the movie. Streets of Laredo. 1914 to 1918. Herbert Hoover. TV miniseries. Homicide: Life on the Street. He was Stanley the Big Man Bolander for 33 episodes of that. What else is there? Roseanne, Ed Connor. He was in for 6 episodes. The Boys TV series. He's been in a lot of stuff. He's one of the Beatties. And anyone who knows the Beatties will know Ned. Ned Beatty. He is one of those amazing character actors. Stocky, genial-looking supporting actor Ned Beatty was once hailed by Daily Variety as the busiest actor in Hollywood. He's got that southern accent going on for him, which is pretty cool. I've always liked him as an actor and what he does, and he plays this very interesting detective, Chief Gunderson, Chief Roy Gunderson, with some of the fun stuff that happens there. He's talking to everybody and kind of laying things out, and while he's talking, that there's been a murder and he's going to solve it, and etc., etc. Meanwhile, you get to see, just outside the windows, you see Jessica Fletcher walking back and forth, looking at things as if she's trying to figure things out. And Chief Gunderson is keeps noticing her while he's talking and kind of trailing off a little before continuing on with what he's saying. Then he ends up going out and talking to her in person. Catches her as she's attempting to scale the trellis on the side of the house to prove a point. And there's a wonderful little exchange between them, because he's like, "Miss Fletcher," he's like, "I read your book." And she's like, "Oh, well, thank you." He's like, "I didn't say I liked it. I said I read it." And he never actually comes out and says whether he liked the book or not. He's a very strange character, this Gunderson. And they go and have a conversation, and you kind of get the picture that he wants to know what Jessica Fletcher is thinking about this murder, because he can tell that she's very smart, she's very clever, and he knows he's not. So he's trying to take advantage of pretty much anything that he can. And things move on from there as suspects start coming up. Because as they're talking, something happens. Out there in the gardens, Caleb McCallum shows up. He's not dead. Meanwhile, they're wondering, well, it starts getting on to why aren't you dead? Who's that wearing who's that wearing the coat? The Sherlock Holmes costume then? What's going on? And we find out as things progress that Jessica Fletcher is wondering as to who the target was intending to kill, because maybe they didn't see who it was in the Sherlock Holmes costume, thought it was the captain, wanted to kill the captain. Or maybe they did, and they knew who was actually killed in the costume and wanted to kill them. It all depends on who the killer thought their victim was at the time of the murder, as to who the killer could be. Dun dun dun! I know, it's one of those complicated ones. We get a lot of interesting things happening. Bounces back and forth. And it turns out that the person that was dressed as Sherlock Holmes was actually Dexter Baxendale, the private detective, which leads to a whole bunch of other questions. How did he know that costume was in the front closet? How did he know to put it on? Why did he come back? Etc. 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 And it's very very interesting how it progresses from here, because it goes on to all of a sudden Jessica's deciding, no, I'm done. Uh, this murder has happened, and it's one thing to write about murder; it's another thing to be connected to it. She's going back to Cabot Cove, so she goes back to the train station again. Except she doesn't quite get on the train again. Bit of a running gag to this episode, because Grady's been arrested. They suspect that he may be the murderer, which of course Jessica's got to stay now. She's got to prove Grady innocent. But they're questioning both him and Ashley Vickers because it's either one or the other. So after Grady gets let out, they're all having this big council of war, and Ashley Vickers, oh, pardon me, and Ashley Vickers comes into the restaurant, and Jessica runs over and is like, would you like to join us? We're having a council of war, etc. And she's like, no, it's not necessary, because I have a perfect alibi for the time of the murder, because Ashley Vickers was with Jessica half naked in a room upstairs while Jessica washed her dress so it wouldn't stain. That was when the murder occurred. So Jessica is the alibi for one of the suspects, leaving Grady kind of hanging in the wind. And they think that, well, you end up finding out that the private detective was hired by Caleb McCallum because Caleb suspects one of his employees of stealing information and selling it before he could act on it. Real estate locations. So they suspect Grady was the one doing that, even though Grady isn't. And then comes some fun, because Jessica becomes convinced that Ashley Vickers had to do it. She had to be responsible, connected in some way. I'm not sure how. But somehow. So what does she do? She goes and gets Grady to sneak her into the offices so she can rummage around and try and find something. Because Jessica Fletcher isn't one to just let, proper police procedure get in the way. No, she's going to go snoop around on her own. Bit of a busybody, as I said. There's a little scene where she's there and Ashley Vickers comes in, almost catches her, but she overhears a conversation that she's got an accomplice. Something's twigging. So what does she do? Instead of waiting for Grady, she runs off and gets on a bus to follow another bus. And we have some cameos at this point. It's really quite interesting cameos, in fact. Where's the bus driver here? No cab driver, mailman, no. Is it George? George! Yes, he's the bus driver. And the bus driver is Herb Edelman. And Herb Edelman has been in a few big things. A number of episodes of Murder, She Wrote. Oh my god. Yeah, he was in the first episode as George. He was in an episode 2 years later as Lieutenant Varick. An episode a year later as Max Hellinger. And then he was in 1, 2, 3, 4, five, six, seven. 7 more episodes as the same character, Lieutenant Artie Gelber. 1 in 92, 2 in 1, 2, 3, 4 in 93. NYPD Lieutenant Artie Gelber. And then 1 in 94 and 1 in 95. Interesting recurring characters. What else has he been in? Batman the Animated Series as Stern, mob boss. But I think the one that most people will know Herb Edelman from is either Richard Clarendon in Saint Elsewhere, or Stan Zbornak, Stanley, basically Dorothy's estranged husband in The Golden Girls. Well, that's the actor that played George, a simple bus driver in the first episode, who makes her have to get exact change for a bus. And this is where one of the other cameos popped up. There's a bag lady sitting on the bus, and she's got one of those things that arcade owners used to have to dole out like quarters. She's got one of those. And Jessica gets basically asked if she has 4 quarters for $1. And she replies back with, she's got 3 quarters for $1. Because it's 75 cents for the bus. So she gives her $1 and gets 3 quarters from it. And it's basically like, you must be doing very well for yourself. And the bag lady's like, it beats welfare. And that bag lady is Anne Ramsey. Anne Ramsey. She is a character actress who just exploded in the 80s. She was on Throw Mama from the Train as Mama. She was in The Goonies as Mama Fratelli. She was in Night Court, episode of Night Court. She was in Alf, the TV series. Scrooged. She was a woman in a shelter. Oh yeah. She's been in quite a few episodes back in the day, and she usually had like small little roles, but she just was such an amazing character actress that people just loved her, loved seeing her. Yeah, she was the bag lady, but neither Anne Ramsey or Herb Edelman is the one I was talking about. The one I'm talking about that I recognized, even despite how young he is one of 2 young men on the street who end up harassing Jessica Fletcher and pulling her into an alley, going to rob her. And one of them, the one I'm talking about here, pulls a knife and said he's going to give her a free blood test. That actor, looking so young, was Andy Garcia. Yep, Andy Garcia. From The Godfather Part 3, from the Ocean's 11, 12, 13 movies as Terry Benedict, from The Untouchables. Just everything he's been in. Apparently Andre Allen in the TV series Ballers. He was Mayor Bradley in the new 2016 Ghostbusters movie. He's been in so much stuff. So much. Yeah. Smoking Aces he was in. Just a ton of stuff. And he was in Murder, She Wrote in the first episode. I wonder if it actually shows it down here. Yep. Murder, She Wrote. First White Tough. Andy Garcia. It blew my mind when I saw it. I couldn't couldn't believe it. Couldn't get over it. It was amazing. So that happens. And she gets saved because when she's getting on the bus, there's a couple shots of this African American fellow, jean jacket, looking very dour and serious. And when Jessica is telling the bus driver she wants to get off right then, because she just seen the person she's tailing in another bus get off, you see the African American fellow get up and head down to the second set of doors, waiting to get off. And he gets off and follows Jessica. And when these two white toughs, as they're called, start harassing Jessica and threaten to hurt her, in swoops the African American fellow, who beats them up and sends them packing, and then asks Jessica if she's all right. And he recognizes her because he read her book and he really liked it. So he's just a nice guy. I wonder what's his name? Where is he? Black Youth. That's got to be him. That's what he's credited as. Russell Curry. He hasn't been in a lot. Sunset Beach. Dr. Tyrus Robinson for 2 years. Or 3 years. All 205 episodes? How do you get 205 episodes in 2 years? Unless it's a soap. It's probably a soap. Yeah. Santa Barbara. Another World. He was in Falling Down. Guiding Light. So yeah, he does a lot of soap operas, I gather. Not too much other than that. He was only in the one episode of Murder, She Wrote, though. He was on The Cosby Show. Claire's sister. What? Oh. No, he was Tad in the episode Claire's sister. Okay. I was like, wait a minute. I don't remember that episode of The Cosby Show. So he helps her. And they go back and kind of set up a bit of a meeting, trying to get she calls Gunderson to get him to look at some files because they need to find some information. And Jessica ends up going to a theater after finally finding out where Mr. Brill is holding his auditions by looking through dozens of papers for the ad, and confronts both Peter Brill and Ashley Vickers, who admit to stealing the information, getting Grady off the hook for that. But she's not going down for murder because she's got an alibi. But so did Peter Brill. Peter Brill was in the party singing to everybody when it happened. So it couldn't have been him either. So who did it? Oh my God, who did it? All kinds of things just swirling around. And Jessica just finally is going to go home. She's finally going to go home. Put everything to rest. You know, there's nothing more that they can do. But she's finally going to go home. Except she doesn't. I skipped a bit there. Let's jump back. Even though I've just seen the episode, it was a long episode, an hour and a half, because it's a pilot, so it's basically 2 hours on TV with commercials. But we end up finding Chief Roy Gunderson goes to Caleb McCallum's boat because there's an anonymous tip given to the police that they could find something interesting there. And what they find is some blood droplets here and there. No Caleb. Only they start raising the sail, and Caleb has been put inside the sail, and he's dead. So naturally the police are thinking, well, whoever killed the private detective obviously meant to kill Caleb, because they went after Caleb again and killed him. Obviously. which means Grady is off the hook, more or less. Because the one who stole the files was Ashley, to help with Preston, or not Preston, to help with Peter Brill, because the money Peter made off the information is funding his new off-Broadway play. All the clues are coming together. And all this and that. So things are more or less settled, even though Jessica still doesn't think it is. But she's finally had enough. She's finally going home. She's only tried like 3 times so far in this episode. And she finally gets on the train. She's supposed to meet up with this reporter from the New York Times that wants to talk to her. And it isn't until she's sitting there and opens the paper and sees the name of the reporter that she wants to, that's going to be meeting with her, and the reporter's picture, that she finally jumps up and is all yelling for Daniel and running out and getting a train to New Holvang. And there is a wonderful, there's a scene with Preston Giles where he finds out Jessica's taking a train to New Holvang. So he gets his secretary to get his jet ready and he flies out after her. Jessica's taking a cab to the manor house where the murder happened. She's going to go in. There's nobody there. It's dark. It's spooky. And she's going in to check something out. And this is where it all comes together, because she gets confronted by Preston Giles, who shows up. And over the course of this little bit, the lights turn on automatically, because he has a wonderful little bit earlier where he's telling Jessica about how he's got like automated lights and automated banking and automated this and automated that, and he's got everything he could ever want, but he's not happy. But Jessica's making him happy. And Jessica's kind of like, it's going too fast. I don't want to get into anything like this right away. And it's a wonderful scene because Jessica is very emotional in this scene, and angry and sad and crying, and you end up finding out that Preston Giles is the murderer. Preston killed Baxendale because he had a different name, and he had been Preston Giles had been in prison, sent to prison for 15 years because of a building collapse, and his 3 partners, framed him for it, even though it was their problem, and he financially ruined them after escaping from prison 2 years after he was sent up and reinventing himself, new name and whatnot. Only Baxendale was the one who ended up recognizing him. Hence the little bit earlier in the show about the Count of Monte Cristo, because it mirrored his own life, which is why it's his favorite fictional character. Little things like that come back are the key points you got to watch out for in these episodes of Murder, She Wrote. And he admits to killing him. And also Caleb McCallum to help divert suspicion away, because, well, obviously they meant to do that. And I thought for sure he was going to push, because he comes up behind Jessica. She's right in front of the pool, and he's got his arms on her shoulder. I thought he was going to push her into the water or move his hands and try and strangle her, and someone else was going to save. But he doesn't. He says he's going to go and talk to Chief Gunderson and turn himself in, and wants Jessica to go with him. So it's a bit different than a lot of shows where the murderers tend to not give themselves up. They need to be backed into a corner in a lot of crime shows these days. Whereas this one, he was moral. He had his character, Preston Giles, was moral enough to turn himself in because he'd been found out. Even though he tried to hide it, he still has that moral center to turn himself in. He does, and Jessica finally gets to go home. Finally, after everything. Only at the last minute, the young lady that was with Grady comes running up saying that the police want her help in solving this murder. There was 2 wrestlers that had been killed. They were found dead inside the ring in Madison Square Gardens. One of them had been stabbed and the other one drowned. And Jessica's just like, no, I'm going home. I'm going home. And gets on the train and it starts pulling away. And then there's this shot of the train pulling away and the camera turning as the door leading into the train. And Jessica's there, just about to go into the train car, period. Stops and turns and is like, drowned? And then the credits start rolling. So you get the feeling that she stayed a little while longer to help solve that murder too. And that is the first episode of Murder, She Wrote. It's a wonderful and delightful little show. All like very much kind of comedic in a way, but also very serious and dramatic. There's a lot of those little comedic moments with Jessica acting all down home-ish and, you know, simple and whatnot. At least in that term of, you know, liking the simple life. And there's a lot of characters. A lot of characters. I hope I haven't been boring you too much in this. But that's this episode. Episode 1, the pilot. The murder of Sherlock Holmes. So what's going to happen next? Well, that's a good question. Season 1, Episode 0. The pilot episode. Now, where is the thing at? Boom, boom. There we go. All right. So, I'm going to leave this episode here. As always, if you like what I'm doing, please give that like button a tap. Give that subscribe button a tap as well, if you haven't already, so you can be kept apprised of when I do new videos. Usually try and get at least one video out a week, if not more. And throw a comment in the comment section. What do you think of Murder, She Wrote? The show or whatnot. What did you think of this episode? For those of you who wish to watch along with me, that's fine. You certainly can. You just need to get yourself an episode. Get yourself that episode. The Murder of Sherlock Holmes as well first aired the 30th of September, 1984. Starting, or in the next episode of the Murder, She Wrote Rewatch podcast, we will deal with, because that was Season 1, Episode 0. This will be Season 1, Episode 1, Deadly Lady. A mysterious man who briefly stops by Jessica's house turns up dead, supposedly swept overboard during a hurricane before Jessica even met him. Interesting. And that episode originally aired October 7th, 1984. Every 7 days, once a week. So it's looking interesting what's going to happen. So until next time, my friends, you all take care. I hope you've enjoyed listening to me ramble on about Jessica Fletcher, the saucy lady that she is. And we'll be back again soon. I don't know if this is going to be a weekly thing or a bi-weekly thing or perhaps a monthly thing just yet. I'm still working out the details on that. When I know, I will let you know. And but regardless, I will see you again soon for episode 2 of the Murder, She Wrote Rewatch podcast. Deadly Lady. And until then, you all stay safe and keep watching.